So today we're going to be continuing to look at the alternative future of the world. Now it has been a hot second since I last made an alternative future video, but we're finally back with part 11. In the last video we had a lot of things going down. If I remember correctly, we had a big war in South America, which entirely changed the continent. And we also had some unifications taking place in Europe, such as Czechoslovakia, I'm pretty sure Germany and Austria. And then finally we had Russia having a lot of reforms. So a lot of the land that they annexed from other countries over here in Eastern Europe was given back to those countries, such as Finland over here. We had Poland getting stuff back, and then most obviously we had Ukraine getting their central territory back. We had the release of Georgia and Armenia, and overall we had tensions lessening between the WDO and Russia. But before we jump into this alternative feature video, make sure you guys leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Roughly around 55% of you guys aren't subscribed to the channel, and if we manage to bring that number down and bring up the amount that are subscribed, we have the possibility of hitting 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. If you're new to the channel and you don't know, that is our end of the year goal. So yeah, make sure to show some support. Anything helps. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump right into this video. Now, as I was saying last time, South America had a big war and everything down here was kind of neutralized. The Rio Pact does still exist, although it doesn't serve much of a purpose anymore, and we are also starting to see the WDO losing its importance. With Russia not really being a major threat anymore, we have a lot of these countries kind of reevaluating their position within the alliance. But coming over to Europe, we actually have a country leaving the WDO. And believe it or not, this country is going to be Turkey. Now, in real life, Turkey is starting to kind of lean away from NATO as a whole. I don't think they were ever really too keen in being in the alliance, but in this scenario, Russia has become friendly. They now have a buffer state, which is Georgia and Armenia, and overall they don't really border any enemies other than Iran, but I'm pretty sure Turkey can stop Iran in this situation, so they don't really have the help of the WDO. But yeah, Turkey finally leaves the WDO, and I did just realize that I still need to update this map. There's a lot of changes that have taken place, which well, you can kind of see it's kind of all over the world. You can see the differences in the borders. But now we come down to Africa, where we have a war breaking out. And this war is a defensive war that has been brought upon by the Northern African Alliance. I have no idea what I call this thing, and I watched the whole video and I don't remember there being a name. So if there was a name, it's going to be changed. And now it's just going to be known as the Northern African Axis. And these guys decide that they want to overthrow some governments in Central Africa. And unfortunately, it's going to be the governments of Chad and the Central African Republic. I know, these guys have not had their borders changed this entire series, while pretty much everyone else has, and unfortunately they're going to fall into an act of aggression. Now, of course, these countries have been neutral forever, so of course the world is going to condemn their actions, but we don't see much support flowing into these two countries as they're already fairly weak, and trying to support them would just be a waste of equipment. So after a few weeks of invasion, they both surrender. Alright, so taking a look at this peace treaty here, we have Libya and Sudan both gaining land from Chad and the Central African Republic, but the main factor that has changed here is that they have been given new governments, which are now pro-North African Axis, African Axis. And just like that, this alliance has now encompassed pretty much a quarter of Africa. Now, notably, some countries are going to be not so happy about this, particularly the Central African Federation as well as Nigeria. But there is now essentially a big border between all these alliances. With the WDO in Algeria, we have Nigeria, and then the EAF. And the red team really can't expand anymore, except that they can definitely expand into Niger. So not even a month after toppling the governments of the Central African Republic and Chad, we have troops moving into Niger. Now this is going to play out a little bit differently since the WDO is a defensive organization and they're kind of concerned about this expansion over here. They're worried that if the red team annexes Niger, then they'll be able to annex the West African Union. I think that's what I called it. Probably not. And if that gets annexed, then that's a lot of territory that the red team will have, which makes it kind of a problem if a war were to ever break out. Essentially, they're trying to prevent the expansion of this alliance. So the WDO joins the war as a peacekeeping force, and with this they aim to kind of save Niger from being annexed by the red team. And Niger is opposed to this, and they say, hey, both of you guys need to stop this because this is just classic imperialism. They both say no because they have better things to do, which is invading Niger. But Nigeria also joins in this war, except they're on the side of the WDO. Now I'm fairly certain, I could be wrong because I haven't rewatched the entire series, but I'm pretty sure Nigeria was a part of the WDO at one point. If not, I know they were 100% allied with the WDO in the big conflict in like part 5. So I don't think Nigeria would have a problem with helping out the WDO in the situation. So the red team gives order to the troops to pretty much storm Niger. They aren't really worried about suppression, and honestly they're not really even worried about killing the other army because they just want the land and the war score. So this is a pretty sloppy invasion, but they do get a lot of land out of it. Fortunately enough for Niger, or maybe unfortunately enough. The WDO successfully cuts off the red team from expanding any further into Niger territory. So with this, the purple team armies kind of sweep through the rest of Niger. I'm not really sure if they would be fighting because they are calling themselves peacekeeping forces, but we do see a front line that looks something like this. So let's go ahead and take a look at the treaty. So looking at this treaty here, we have an interesting kind of thing taking place. Now I haven't completed the full peace treaty yet, and that's because I just want to show you what happened in Niger. So obviously Niger isn't like 100% Niger. It also includes parts of Mali and Burkina Faso, I think. So with that, the two sides make a decision to kind of split Niger from its original border. So they do that here. That's what this line is. And then we have the North African Axis gaining land that they annexed. And then we have the WDO and Nigeria claiming the other half of the land, which they used to stop the expansion of the North African Axis. Now this area is going to be made independent and it's going to be made into its own country. It's just simply going to be known as the West African Republic. So with this, we can now finalize the rest of the treaty, which is basically just Algeria and Nigeria splitting this claim into half. So now the WDO has successfully stopped the red team from expanding any further, and we have the implementation. Apparently English is not my first language anymore. But yeah, this country joins in on the red team, and we actually have the West African Republic joining the blue team. Once again, I'm gonna have to update this alliance map on my own, but it looks like this basically. And Nigeria once again isn't in the WDO, but they are leaning towards it. Same with the Central African Federation. So the red team really is at a roadblock. They can't expand anywhere except for Tunisia, who recently left the WDO. But I think they're probably smarter not to do that because Tunisia is an ally of the United States. So in the last 3-ish videos, or especially since the end of the Cold War in this timeline, the world has been de-escalating and has been getting a lot more peaceful and a lot less warlike. Other than South America, who just fought a continental war, which that kind of fixed their problems with the whole war thing. But yeah, the world has been like declining in hate. You know, the wars recently in Africa, they've kind of like stopped it and it's now steadying out. Well, the world is bored, to say the least. And we have some countries thinking that another war is on its way, but they're just not sure where it's going to happen. Looking at the world map, there really isn't two major blocks that could fight other than the North African Axis and the WDO, but that's pretty unlikely seeing as the hostilities there aren't as like large as they were with the CSTO and the WDO, so there's no sign of conflict there. But in a particular region in the world, there is a little bit of hate stirring, and that hate is over here in South Asia. Also in the Middle East, between Turkey and Iran, there's aggression between Pakistan and India again. Central Asia is in unrest, and Russia is slowly becoming more stable, but there is still a bunch of rebellious groups who think that the Russian government just needs to be reformed. So Asia as a continent is kind of on fire. But before we jump into that mess, let's go ahead and fix up an already occurring mess. So right now in the world, there are 5 major alliances: the WDO, the Rio Pact, the North African Axis, the Gulf Shield Defense Organization, and the PDO. For me, that's too many alliances. I mean, a lot of these guys who are in a different alliance, such as the PDO, are also allied with the WDO, so why not do some merging? We have the WDO inviting every member of the PDO to the WDO, and every member in the PDO accepts this invitation. So with this, the whole ratification process takes place, and within a few months, we have the PDO fully joining in with the WDO, which essentially abolishes the PDO. Now it is just the WDO. And we see the same thing happening in South America, except it's going to be a little bit different with these guys. So once again, everyone is invited, but only a few of them end up joining. Colombia sees no problem in joining, and the same is said for Chile. These two countries are probably some of the most democratic countries. I know South America was going through a dictatorial phase, but that's kind of been fixed in the last couple of years. Brazil does still have that same leader from the South American War, and he isn't too keen on the WDO, so he abstains from joining, and now it's just Brazil, Uruguay, Venezuela, and the Guyana area? I don't remember what I named it. These guys are also not in the Rio Pact, so I don't know why they're still colored in. Next up, we see Jamaica leave the Rio Pact, and then we see Venezuela accepting the invitation. So now it's literally just Brazil, Uruguay, and the Guyana area. Now, the Guyana area is pretty much allied with their neighbors, so they leave the Rio Pact, which just leaves Brazil and Uruguay, and of course the United States, but those are the only 3 countries. And from there, the United States officially disbands the alliance, but we still do see cooperation between the US and Brazil military-wise, and they technically are still allies, just not like officially in an alliance. And just like that, the world is now WDO dominated. This is a Westerner's dream right now, and if you're not a Westerner, this map makes you want to die. Fair enough. Gonna get a little bit spicy in here though, because Asia is now going into its depressed phase. We have 3 groups in Russia who all say that Russia is stupid. People that hate the West and say that, hey, this new direction is too far. We don't need to be this nice. We gotta take our land back and restart ourselves as a superpower. The second group saying, hey, we're going in a good direction, everyone else sucks. And the third group saying we need to liberate even more of the areas Russia occupies. So we're talking North Ossetia and Abkhazia, we're talking the rest of Ukraine, Belarus, giving the land back to the Baltics. We might even see some of the Russian states released. So with those three groups fighting it out, and of course the Russian parliament is going to be a factor into that, those three parties are going to try to pretty much get rid of each other, and there's a lot of political problems in Russia. So after months and months of no resolve and months of unrest and protest, and some even violent protests, we see Russia break out into a civil war. Some of you guys might be surprised by this since, you know, in the last video Russia was going in a more positive direction, and I also said in the beginning of this video that Russia was becoming slowly more stable, and while that is technically true, the unrest that was already taking place is still there. So the new leader kind of lessened that tension, but it kind of built back up. I don't really know how to explain it without sounding like what I said earlier is invalid. It's complicated. Russia's a very complicated place. But we do see some civil war groups pop up. Group number 1 is the Belarusians. Group number 2 is the Ukrainians. Group number 3, the Georgians. Group number 4, the anti-Westerners. These guys are pretty much along the border of Kazakhstan and Mongolia. And finally, group number 5, the pro-Westerners. These guys are sort of in the same fighting cause here, whereas the red team is basically just screw everyone, restore the Russian monarchy, maybe go communist again. We're definitely not communist, and yeah, we're gonna destroy Russia because you guys are doing it, so why can't we do it? Now the world's reaction to this is something like, oh, that's not good. Mostly because the WTO was focusing on improving relations with Russia, so this outbreak is not favorable for them. And it's going to be a little bit tricky here because some of the WTO members are going to be like funding these wars, such as Ukraine is most likely going to be funding these rebellions over here in the rest of Ukraine. We'll see Georgia, which is a WTO ally, try to fund these guys. I don't know, I'm not really sure how far they're going to get. And of course, the pro-Westerners are going to receive support from people in the WTO because they're pro-Western. And then the red team will be receiving support from countries like Iran and Pakistan, maybe Afghanistan, and most notably the Northern African Axis. So when this first breaks out, everyone thinks it'll probably blow over really quickly because it's not like that crucial of a rebellion, and especially considering that the red team has not that many important places under their control. But what we do have to realize is Russia is a very vast country, so protecting all this is near to impossible. A majority of Russia's military assets are going to be near the Moscow area. We'll most likely see defenses in this area, but other than that, this area is open game. So after a few weeks, we have the red team taking complete control over central Russia, and Siberia just kind of falls under that category. They don't have troops there, but they kind of claim it as their own. And that is a scary map, but when you really think about it, they don't have that much. But it could kind of be used to scare Russian citizens and Russian government officials into surrendering to the red team. So we do have that happening on a smaller local scale. As for the rebellions, the Russian army is kind of confused on what to do, but for now they focus on fighting back the red team and kind of just let the rebellions run their course. Ukraine manages to capture Crimea as well as pushing into the Donbass area, and we see Belarus linking up with the pro-Westerners. Now the government of Russia here is probably going to, like, I don't know, they're going to be smart about this, but Moscow was like within grabbing position from all of these guys, so they had to think of a plan that will satisfy everyone, which is impossible because there's three factions that all hate each other, and no matter what they'll do, two people are going to be angry. So since the red team is the main aggressor in this war, Russia decides that they're going to be nice to Belarus, Ukraine, and Georgia. Alright, looking at this peace treaty that Russia just drafted up with the rebellions, we can see that they basically just released Belarus, Ukraine, and Georgia. Now, of course, this timeline runs off of the real-life timeline, so Russia currently right now doesn't own any of Belarus, Ukraine, or Georgia. But then eventually in this timeline, they all got annexed by Russia, and then now they've been released again, so the old 1991 borders have been restored. Now this does relieve Russia of a little bit of their suffering and pain, but it doesn't necessarily fix all their problems, as the red team is now just infuriated with this decision, and the orange team is fairly happy with it. They don't really care that much. But with this, we do see the orange team take over the slither of land, which effectively cuts Russia off from Kaliningrad, and we see Kaliningrad declare independence. Now this move is pretty large because Russia no longer has as much access to the ocean as they used to, but they're just kind of forced into accepting it because they can't do anything about it. They have to hold back the red team. So Russia and the orange team make peace, and we now just see Russia versus Russia. Now this conflict is going to go on for years, and it's definitely not going to be an easy one for either side. We see the red team pushing out any remaining Russian defenders over here in the east, But on the western front line, we have the red team being pushed back. Fast forwarding ahead, we have Russia making gains in the northern area of their territory, while the red team makes gains and actually manages to push down into southern Russia and capture this entire area. There's an overall red team massive counter-offensive, which goes very well for them, until eventually the two sides agree that, hey, we're very different from each other and we both want to kind of leave each other alone, and Russia makes the biggest sacrifice by far and signs peace with these rebellions. So let's go ahead and take a look at that peace deal. Alright, taking a look at this peace treaty here, we can see that Russia has been split in half, and honestly it is a huge loss for the original Russian government. Now these guys have completely changed their government. There's been a reform, and that was kind of demanded by the pro-Western faction that was over here in the West. So that is now kind of in place, and these guys are looking forward to doing a lot of collaborations with Europe, because there is now a big threat, and that threat being this, which is just going to be called Russia. Now I'm not going to call it East Russia and West Russia, because actually no, that kind of makes sense because these guys are Western now. Maybe I will call it West and East Russia. That'll just be for simplicity though. We'll have the Russian Republic and then the People's Republic of Russia. That really draws the line there. Russia now says that, hey, we're going to join the WTO because these guys are kind of scary. They just beat us in a war somehow. And the WTO is like, okay, cool. We're a global organization, so we don't see a problem with you joining. However, there are a few things that you must kind of admit to and do. First of all, you have to admit that you suck as a country and that everything that's happened in the world is your fault. Now, of course, that's not true, but Russia still kind of goes along with it. And then next up, you have to give back a little bit more land. Said land is land that they owe to the Baltics. All right, no problem with that. The Baltics now have all of their original land back, and basically we just have a bunch of border restoration that's happening over here. They already gave land back to Ukraine and Belarus, so that's kind of good on them. And they finally end up joining the WTO, except once again the map is not updated, but they just assume it's going to look like that. So just like that, the world is now heading back into another era of hate and conflict, with this new Russian power stepping up and saying, hey, we need to do something about us sucking. And when they say us, they're referring to the fragmented Eastern world. Countries that remain in that are basically just Iran and Pakistan, as well as Afghanistan. And then once again, the North African axis. I feel like I've said that phrase like 100 times this video already. So here's a temporary draft of the alliance map. We have a new alliance forming, which is kind of a merger. It's Eastern Russia joining in on the North African axis, which promptly changes its name to the New World Order. That's a scary name. Whenever we see names like that in real life, they usually fizzle out, but this one shows some potential in actually achieving that, and that is solely counting on the WTO not doing anything about their expansion. Quickly, we see Iran and Pakistan join in on this alliance, followed by that is Afghanistan, and slowly but surely we have this new alliance showing some promise. Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan join, which leaves Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan over here in Central Asia, who have moved away from Russia and the East as a whole, and show no interest in joining this alliance. However, we already know that the East is a little bit forceful. Same can be said with the West, but Russia itself may not let that slide for long. But yeah, we have two notably large alliances that exist in this world now, and there's only there's only 3 remaining. But the third one is not very big, the Shield Alliance. Not much going on there, but the WTO versus the New World Order axis, the NWO. But that is going to do it for today's alternative future of the world video. And if you guys did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Like I said, we are aiming for 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. And if you're new, that is our end goal for the year, not for the YouTube channel. If we can do that, that would be amazing. I have like 5 to 6 things planned for 100K already, so getting us there will just get us to those special things faster. And honestly, the 100K special will probably be the largest celebration that I'll ever do on the channel. It's gonna be really hard to one up the 50K special because you guys really love that video. I loved making it. It took forever to make, but it was a really fun video. I don't know if I'll be able to one up that because it's just, that was a big thing. That was my biggest project so far. And the video quality, now I don't want to say quality, but like the videos that are going to be released for 100K aren't going to be on the same scale as the 50K special. And that's just because the 100K special is going to span a lot more than the 50K. The 50K was just one thing. 100K is going to be expanding that range. So yeah, subscribing is important. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.